We are all familiar with doing basic Google searches. We Google things all the time. However, Google results don't always offer the best sources for academic papers. In this tutorial, I'll show you how to use basic web searches to find quality internet sources for your essays. Before we begin, let's talk about some common errors we make that hinder our success at research. Number 1, expecting to find the perfect article. This is one that embodies our thesis statement and exactly matches what we hope to argue. It often happens when we're given a topic or we already know what we're going to argue before we even start. However, good scholarship involves withholding conclusions until after thorough research and synthesizing multiple sources to form pieces of a larger argument that is all our own. Not to mention, it's rare to find a source that argues the exact same thing that we would like to. Number 2, building your paper from first page results. When you build your paper with the search results you get on the first page or so of a Google search, it can create an imbalanced or incoherent discussion with ideas that are just stuck together without logical ties instead of carefully selected points that fit well together. Number 3, getting all your main points from one source. So let's say you do find the perfect article that says exactly what you wanted to say. Isn't that sufficient? Well, no. Remember, in college you aren't just responsible for a finished product, but the effort and subsequent learning experience that went into it. Even if a source does play a major role in your essay, you will need to bring in your own ideas as well as additional sources to provide substantial and effective evidence and discussion. As you start finding possible internet sources to use for your paper, it's important to utilize what is often referred to as the CRAP test to ensure the source itself is a high enough quality to use in a college-level essay. You want to make sure it is current and up to date, that the source provides reliable information and is professional in nature. The author or website is an authority or expert on the issue, and that it lacks bias. Its purpose is to present factual information from an objective point of view. For more information on the CRAP test, click here. There are lots and lots of sources on the internet to help you evaluate other sources on the internet. And this one here is one of my favorite infographics to help you see which sources are best to use in college-level essays. The sources in the middle are great sources of news, while these sources up here provide a little bit more in-depth information on specific topics. These here are not great, but they're better than nothing. And everything that's an outlier are things that you should avoid like the plague. They just don't belong in academic essays. You can click on this graphic to go to the actual image so you can use it for your own research. So now that you know what to avoid and also a little bit about how to evaluate sources for their quality, it's time to start talking about how to actually conduct an effective search. There are many techniques that you can use, but I'm going to focus on two that you probably already use to some extent: refining searches and rabbit hole, or going down the rabbit hole. When you refine a search, you start with a broad topic or general keywords, perhaps the assignment topic you were given. And just like an oil refinery takes crude oil and turns it into various refined products of actual use, you keep tweaking your keywords as you familiarize yourself with your topic. You develop more keywords and related ideas. Further, as you read about your topic in broader terms, patterns will emerge and ideas for your argument will begin to formulate in your head. You'll begin to consider specific pieces of evidence you'll need, case studies, polls, explanations of a complicated aspect, and so forth. This is the answer to the problem of trying to find one perfect article. Instead, look for many appropriate pieces, like a fill in the blank to a paper you're starting to write in your head. So here I'm conducting a basic Google search on my topic, which is long-distance transit of food. I can see right away that I have a lot of results. In fact, I have over 2 million. And I also see that this isn't really the kind of results I was hoping to get. So some of them seem like they might be on track, but others are really spending time talking about perishable foods, avoiding spoilage, food transportation safety. This one's even talking about transit time through the large intestine. I'm looking more for environmental impact, and I think that I need to refine my search a little bit. One nice thing that Google does is it will post searches related to long-distance transit of food, or whatever your topic is, at the bottom of your search. I see here a couple that have to do with the environmental impact, but the one that really stands out to me is this one that says food miles impact on the environment. Food miles is a keyword that I hadn't been considering. I'm going to click on that and see what I get. I get a little bit of an explanation of food miles right on the top of the page. Google likes to explain things to you in little blurbs. Oftentimes they'll get it from really commonly used articles or Wikipedia articles. I'm also getting a lot of really interesting sources, but I need to double check to make sure that they're quality sources. So I'm going to open a few in new tabs and kind of check them out as I go along. So this one sounds good to me. This one sounds good too. And I'm going to pick one more just to get started. So I'll go to my first one. This is a PDF from the National Resource Defense Council. I already know that I kind of think that this is a pretty stand-up, legitimate organization. But if you weren't sure, you can do a basic Google search just to find out about them. You can also go directly to their website and research their about pages. This seems like a pretty good source. It gives us a good overview, lots of facts. I think this is something I'm going to use. So I'm going to keep this tab open. And if you're using something like Safari, you could even add it to your reading list or any browser's bookmarks. Checking out my next one, The Ecotarian, Your Guide to Sustainable Eating. I'm not really sure about this one. It's not a major organization that I'm familiar with. Looking through, and I do see some links to references, and that's a good sign. But that's not the only thing that you need to do. Look at their About Us page. A group of university student researchers from London trying to be more planet friendly. Well, I can see that they definitely have a purpose, but it's not necessarily one that I'm averse to. I'll use their research because they do seem to know what they're doing, but I'm also going to consider that this isn't necessarily the most unbiased source. So I'm going to take a look at one more article from The Guardian, How the Myth of Food Miles Hurts the Planet. Now, the name The Guardian sounds really familiar. I think I remember it. Yep, that's where it was. A great in-depth source of news. So, I'm pretty sure that this will be a useful source to use in my paper, or at least a good place to get more information as I delve into my topic. But one problem that I'm coming across is that this is a little bit of a different stance than I was going for. See, I was thinking that buying local was better, but here it says, the myth of food miles hurts the planet, and buying locally can hurt the planet? So what do I do with this new information? Well, as an academic, perhaps it's going to impact my stance, because my stance is always evolving with new information. Maybe it'll become part of a counter-argument, where I clarify problems with my actual stance. Or maybe it's going to take my argument in a new direction. Either way, I have to consider this new information. Another thing that this article can do is provide additional keywords to help me search. So I'm looking in here, and I see things like the Fife diet. I've never heard of that. I'm going to add that to my keyword list. Ethical eating. Again, these are new words that I'm not really familiar with. I'm also seeing things repeatedly. Carbon dioxide, carbon footprint, carbon cost labels. So what I'm learning is that there are a lot of other branches of this particular argument that I haven't really looked into. And I think I'm going to be starting with carbon cost labels. And I know just how to do that. Rabbit hole searches are a great way to get deeper and deeper into your topic. Rabbit hole searches can be combined with your refining searches. Here you essentially use general resources to go deeper and deeper into specific aspects of your form and argument, down the rabbit hole, if you will. You mine things like popular source articles for their sources in the form of clickable links that ultimately lead you to good primary sources. For instance, a New York Times article that discusses a study might link to the actual study itself, an excellent scholarly source. You can also go directly to reference or wiki sites like Wikipedia to not only learn more about your topic, but also to explore their references. So let's give that a shot. So I'm on Wikipedia's website and I'm going to do a search for carbon cost labels. That was the keyword that I liked from the Guardian article that we just looked at. But unfortunately, the page carbon cost labels doesn't exist. There's some other interesting alternatives, carbon tax, carbon footprint. I like this carbon trust because that was another one of those keywords that I noticed on the Guardian article. So I'm going to click on that. This gives me some great basic information about the company, and not for dividend company, called Carbon Trust. And as I'm reading through, I'm beginning to realize that this is a little bit more complicated than I originally thought. I do see that there is a link for the carbon reduction label. So I'm going to open that and check that out in a little bit. But first, I need to learn a little bit more about what exactly a carbon footprint is. So I'm going to click on that first. This page is very informative actually, and it has a lot more information on the previous one. One thing to note on Wikipedia is there's all of these little things. They're called footnotes or references. And when you look at them, many of them on Wikipedia, that is, point to these articles that appear to be scholarly readings. I'm going to scroll down because that's where all of them are located and see what they have for me. And here we have a whole lot of articles, many of which are scholarly, most of which would be useful in a college level paper. The nice thing about Wikipedia is that not only does it list references, but it also links to them. Now be aware, some of those links might be broken, but it is entirely possible to find a lot of useful and accessible scholarly articles right in the notes or references section of a Wikipedia page. Well, that about wraps it up, but just a couple more tips before I go. The first thing I want to remind you to do is always keep a log of the websites you visit. Just simply having them in your search history is not always sufficient, and sometimes it's hard to remember what the name of an article was that you really liked amongst a whole lot of articles that you looked at. You can have a reading list in Safari, or try a new bookmark or favorite folder, or even just do something simple like copy and paste web addresses into an email or a Google Doc or a working bibliography. And lastly, to avoid plagiarism, never ever copy and paste text from an article directly into your paper. There's a lot of workarounds, including keeping a separate document of color-coded notes, or try something lo-fi, like write down your notes by hand in a notebook. That ensures that you aren't going to simply be pasting information and not putting it in direct quotes in your paper. Remember, the best way to do it when you take notes is to simply write down facts, or if there's a really great quote you want to use, put that in quotation marks to ensure that you know that that wasn't your language. I hope this was helpful, and I hope that you have a good time searching for your paper topics. Cheers!